Good evening, and welcome to the last segment of our Accent on Advent, brought to you by Centenary United Methodist Church in Morristown, Tennessee. I'm Ginger Isom, the pastor. In addition to the beautiful hymns played by Harpist Kelly Shipe, tonight we are also joining Ben Yosua-David of Chebeague Island, Maine. Ben is the worship leader at Chebeague Island United Methodist Church, where his wife Melissa is the pastor. I met Ben in the summer of 2017 when I became a participant in Academy 39 of the 2-year Academy of Spiritual Formation through the Upper Room. Ben was the worship leader for the Academy, which met at the Malvern Retreat Center in Malvern, Pennsylvania. And he brought energy and creativity to worship each day. Tonight, Ben and I will be talking about the gifts of the hymns of Advent and how they help us have not only a richer Advent experience, but also a richer Christmas experience. To move us toward that conversation, Kelly will introduce one more hymn tonight. Then following the conversation with Ben, and to close us out, we are going to treat you to a replaying of all of the hymns Kelly has blessed us with over these past 4 weeks. So let's get started. The last hymn we are bringing to you tonight, the refrain of which we have been using to follow the lighting of the Advent wreath at Centenary, is "I Want to Walk as a Child of the Light." It is one of our newer hymns and actually speaks to the seasons of Advent, Christmas, and Epiphany, for the image of light figures prominently in all 3 seasons. The hymn was written by Kathleen Thomerson in 1966, and as Michael Hahn, professor at Perkins School of Theology, suggests in his article at umcdiscipleship.org, the tune is reminiscent of the folk songs being written around the same time period. Hahn cites Dr. Carlton Young, the editor of our United Methodist hymnal, writing, "The hymn conveys a text based upon a wide range of scriptural allusions and biblical images. United Methodist hymnal editor Dr. Carlton Young notes some biblical passages that support the text. Isaiah 42:6c, which says, 'I have given you as a covenant to the people, a light to the nations.' Malachi 4:2, 'But for you who revere my name, the Son of Righteousness shall rise with healing in its wings.' Revelation 21:25b, 'And there will be no night there.' And 22:5b, 'They need no light of lamp or sun.'" Hahn goes on to say that the hymn beautifully depicts a deepening of one's journey in faithful discipleship, which each of the 3 stanzas reflecting the growth that occurs in following Jesus and growing in our relationship with the light of Christ. He also draws our attention to how the song gives us a beautiful picture of the sanctifying grace that is a rich part of our Wesleyan heritage. That understanding of growing in Christian love, or, as Hahn puts it, the perspective of the Christians as they move toward perfection in the faith, becoming transformed in the image of Christ. As mentioned, this hymn is appropriate for Advent, Christmas, as well as Epiphany. Hone pointing out that the image of the star draws our attention to the visitation by the Magi, and the passage in the refrain referencing the Lamb as the light of the city of God looks toward the second coming of Christ. This hymn has become one of my favorites because of the folk sound and of its beautiful imagery. But seeing how the hymn reflects our faith journeys makes this hymn even more meaningful to me as I consider my own walk with Christ, who is the light, and how God brings me alongside others as they too walk closer to Him. Let us listen as Kelly plays this beautiful hymn. Then we will join Ben Yosua-David in Chebeague Island for our conversation. Ben, I welcome you this evening as we come to talk about the music of Advent. You may have heard that I have been having a harpist play some of the hymns of Advent each Sunday. We tend to sing a couple of the hymns for Advent and worship, but then we generally move right into Christmas music because everybody loves those beloved Christmas hymns. But I've wanted us to learn about those hymns and to spend some time with them. So I want us to talk tonight about the Advent hymns and just the importance of those hymns to us in our spiritual practices and worship, and also in understanding and relating that to the Christmas story. Many of our congregations only know a few of these hymns because we don't sing them as often, but the hymns are included in our hymnal for a reason. How do these hymns help us grasp the meaning and importance of Advent, do you think?
I think one of the things that it's important to, one of the reasons why it's important to hold on to these hymns, and indeed hold on to Advent, is because our cultural preparation for Christmas is not an Advent preparation for Christmas. What we see in these Advent hymns, just as we see in the scriptural texts that we read every year, is we are invited into experiences and themes that aren't actually culturally accessible to us when we think about Christmas. So I was thinking about how yearning is such a part of Advent. And I think about the Advent hymn that I think so many of us know so well, O come, Emmanuel. Yes. But I think when we sing that, we're invited to an experience of yearning for something that has not yet come, and a yearning that came from a people that actually did not have the power to reach out and grab that thing on their own because they were an oppressed people, a marginalized people. And in that, then we're invited to yearn for the coming of God, to yearn for God's action in the world, even though and we're not used to this as people who live in America, who are used to being at the centers of power and influence. When we want something, we can go out and we can get it, to wait with yearning for that thing that is not yet to come. Okay. I think about another theme that comes up a lot in our Advent text is that of waiting. And well, Christmas, everyone's waiting for the Christmas day. This is the season where the American consumer culture teaches us about the values of instant gratification. I mean, how many of us have felt the hardship that now that Amazon Prime doesn't ship in 2 days, but we have to wait oh my goodness, it's 10 days before we get our packages and our presents. Yeah. So when we sing these texts, or we sing one of my favorites that is not as commonly sung, All Earth is Waiting to See the Promised Prom, Toda la Tierra. We are reminded that there are things that we are waiting for the breaking forth of love and justice and peace in our world that that will take a lot longer than Amazon's 2 days, or right now, like their 10 days to bring us. And that discipline of waiting is another beautiful one that we normally just wouldn't be able to access in the rush of the season. Advent hymns become a beautiful way for us to interpret this season from a Christian lens rather than a cultural lens, as we think about what does it really mean to wait and prepare for the one who was born among us and the one who will come again.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's beautiful. And speaking of the Amazon, they said today that if you don't order today, you will not get free shipping. So for those that are still stressing about that hurried package, I mentioned a couple of weeks ago in talking with Rennie Morris about the spiritual practices of Advent, that you can't hurry the birth of a baby. And so we can't rush the coming of Jesus. You know, it's all in God's timing, not ours. And so that preparation, that waiting is important. How do our Advent hymns set the stage for God's revelation to the world in the incarnation?
The beautiful thing that these hymns do is they set the scene for us in ways that we often don't pay attention to if we fast forward to the story of Jesus' birth. So we hear, "People look east, the time has come." And those are words of hope that are written in the context of an oppressed people who have been yearning for generations for the Messiah to come. And in the midst of their suffering and pain, they are invited to know that the time is almost here, that the Messiah has come. We hear more uncomfortable words. If you ever read and go through the antiphons in "O Come, Emmanuel," which are, not just the 72 billion verses that we, generally only sing about 2 of, but the antiphons, we discover also uncomfortable things like the theme of judgment, which is also part of the Advent story. We can think about the story of John the Baptist emerging from the wilderness, speaking judgment first to the good religious people of his day, like us. And perhaps in that we can also access a feeling of discomfort. I remember seeing this bumper sticker once that said, "Jesus is about to return, look busy." And the Advent season and some of these hymns, again, remind us that perhaps the idea of Christ coming and being among us should pause and give us an opportunity for self-reflection and thinking about what are we really up to in this season, which is so much about consumer distraction, to think, are we really up to the right things as we prepare for the birth of Jesus, who probably doesn't care as much as we do about whether we get the shiniest new toy for our children or that new flat screen television, but is much more concerned about those who, like Mary, are, the unwed mothers giving birth to a baby in a barn because there was no room for them in the end.
Yeah, I like that you've talked about discomfort, and that's a word that we've not talked about in this series, but Advent does call us to that point of discomfort that we really have to do some self-examination, and we don't like to be uncomfortable in our lives, and so I like that you have pushed us to think about, what is it that's making me uncomfortable right now with relationship to these stories and these scriptures and these songs that we're hearing and singing? And what does that mean for me? Where is that discomfort coming from in my life that I need to address during this Advent season, so that when I come to the side of that manger, then I'm ready to receive the gift that God has given me. So I like that word, discomfort. That's good. I like that. What is the relationship of the Advent hymns to the scriptures that we read and hear at Advent?
What we see in the Advent hymns is our beautiful imaginings of these scripture passages that invite us experientially into the story. So, and I think that this is actually really important for us in this year where we're all in this advent of expectation right now about the vaccine. We're in this hard place where our most sacred holiday rituals with family are going to be badly, badly disrupted by the reality of the coronavirus. And this music sometimes gives us an opportunity, not just cognitively, but emotionally, to enter into that experience of yearning. When we sing, "All earth is waiting to see the promised one," when we sing, "Come thou long expected Jesus," we too, in this moment, can experience what it's like to wait for something that we have no control over, whether we receive it or not. And I think that's the great gift of these great gift of these songs, I think sometimes we hear these scripture passages so often that we become anesthetized to them. We don't realize how shocking and invitational and dangerous and wild and beautiful they are. And one of the things that the Advent hymns can do is open our hearts up to that experience again. Whereas, we might let our eyes glaze as we're listening to that passage from Luke chapter 1 for the umpteenth time in our lives. We hear someone saying, "O come, Emmanuel," which incidentally is now the song I'm singing to my son every night as I brush.
Wonderful. Yeah.
We all got to find formation one way or another.
Yes.
And maybe our hearts travel to those places where we too wish that life could be different. And that puts us in contact with our pain, with our ragged edges, with our unfulfilled longings, those places in our lives that God actually wants most to touch and transform.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the emotion, it conjures up in us the emotions. How important is the emotional aspect of music at any time of year, but especially in these high holy seasons of the church year?
I think it's really important because I think we can forget really easily that music is an embodied thing. And we, because of the gift of the incarnation, are part of an embodied religion, a religion that believes that God put flesh on in the form of a baby. And I think that for those of us who, I come from New England, and they joke up here in New England that we're God's frozen chosen. I often say that my job as a worship leader is to teach people to worship Jesus from the neck down. Like the cognitive stuff comes very easily to us.
And you do that well, by the way.
Yeah, you got firsthand experience of all of that. But music, which has been around for as long as humans have been around in one form or another, we've discovered is one of those things that reconnects us with our body and our emotions, so that we can experience this story throughout all of our being. So this isn't just about us singing Advent texts and learning new, amazing intellectual insights about the nature of Advent. Music is a way that pulls us into the story, so we become co-participants and co-travelers to the manger on Christmas.
So music then is incarnational for us.
Indeed.
So it's incarnational for us. That's beautiful. I love that. So as a worship leader, you have said that you do include some of the traditional hymns early in the Advent season. How do you find that balance? So that people don't rush to the manger, but they realize they're on the way, not there yet. So they still have to kind of stay back, hold back, stay behind the leader instead of rushing ahead of the leader. So how do you find that balance?
I have to say, I occasionally will include Christmas hymns. I weight very heavily towards Advent for all the reasons that we just talked about. Okay. But I think what we have to be aware of is both of all the culture in which we're embedded, which makes the singing of some of those songs during the season important. I know, like when I'm listening to music around the house, I don't not listen to Christmas music until Christmas Day. Like it's on all the time, and it gives me a different way to reflect on the incarnation, because many of those hymns raise some of these very same questions. Yeah. That being said, I think that much of this, if Advent hymns are going to be efficacious for us, if they're going to make a difference for us in the season, then they have to be embedded in a lifestyle of praxis. We can sing nothing but Advent hymns, but if we've otherwise sold out to the instant gratification, materialistic impulses of our culture, then they're not going to do us any good, because they have no parts of our lives to attach to. And so I think in all of this, it's important to put a weight not on what we sing when we gather together on Sunday morning, although that's important, but how does what we sing interpret what's going on in the rest of our lives? Yeah.
And how can you, or how would you suggest people use the Advent hymns as praxis? During the week when we're not together in worship, when we're not normally hearing the Advent hymns, is there a way that you would recommend people kind of take some time with those in their own personal preparation at home, so that those Advent hymns really inform and help them have a more authentic Christmas?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that I can think of. The first thing is we can choose to make them the background track of our holiday preparations. Okay. In other words, Well, I don't know how it works where you all, but where I are, there's always a couple radio stations that completely change their format after Thanksgiving and become like all holiday radio stations, and that's great. And I don't want to discourage anyone from listening to Jingle Bell Rock as much as your heart desires, but we can use these Advent hymns as a way to also kind of set the score for our lives in this preparation. And there are, incidentally, now with digital music, if you have access to Spotify or the like, there are some beautiful Advent playlists that will not only give you the old classics that you've heard before, but a lot of significantly new hymns. This is one of the things I've noticed is actually some of the best new music that's being written in the Christian context is being written for Advent rather than for Christmas, because there's a lot more space to do work in Advent than in Christmas, where we've got kind of our stable of hymns that everyone expects to hear. I also think that it can be helpful to spend some time with the texts and to read them with an eye to what God might be telling us. So, for instance, to go back to O Come, Emmanuel, because I think it's one that many people are very familiar with, to sing that line, O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel, and to pause and think, where am I yearning for the coming of God in my life, in my church, in my community, and to let that reflection lead us into prayer with God, and then to keep singing, that mourns in lonely exile here until the Son of God appears. Who do I know that is mourning in lonely exile right now? Who has been told that they're less than or less than human? Who is isolated right now and needs a word of comfort or acknowledgement of their existence? And there certainly are a lot of people right now who are in that place. And again, let that lead us into prayer or action. Not just read the hymns, but let the hymns read us.
Oh, okay. I like that. Let the hymns read us. That's good. And so that spending some time then in meditation on the hymns and almost line by line from what it sounds like you're suggesting, and just really digesting them. And as you said, letting them read us and inform us. Yeah, that's a good suggestion of how to use those hymns. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us about the music of Advent as we draw to a close this evening?
I think I'd like to point out two things. First of all, that this music is given us by the rich history and tradition of the Church Universal as a way for us to prepare. And so I think in some ways we should receive this as the first gift we receive before Christmas. Mm-hmm. I also want to add, and this is rather incidental to this, one of the, of course, close cousins to hymns are poets and poetry. And there is a lot of beautiful yearning poetry about Advent that can also do the same thing for us. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, I know we're coming to the close of our conversation. I actually grabbed one of my favorites that I thought I might be able to offer us all as a way to wrap us up, if that works for you.
Oh, yes, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Definitely.
So this is a poem by Madeleine L'Engle, who is, many of you probably know her from A Wrinkle in Time. She was a famous children's book author, but she was also a brilliant poet and wrote some of the most beautiful Advent poems that have been written in this last century. Okay. So I would like to read you one, again, again, as an invitation to reflection, called The Risk of Birth, which she wrote at Christmas 1973. And I think these words are particularly apropos to the current moment that we're in. This is no time for a child to be born, with the earth betrayed by war and hate, and a comet slashing the sky to warn that time runs out and the sun burns late. That was no time for a child to be born in a land in the crushing grip of Rome. Honor and truth were trampled by scorn, yet here did the Savior make his home. When is the time for love to be born? The inn is full on the planet Earth, and by a comet the sky is torn, yet love still takes the risk of birth.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And indeed, not just the poetry that is set to music, but the poetry that is set to the heart is also something to include in our Advent practice and
meditation and devotion. So, Ben, I thank you, and I wish you and your family, the two kids now that you have, I wish you all a very Merry Christmas in just a few days, and hope that maybe you'll have a white Christmas. We won't here in East Tennessee, but maybe you will.
I bet not. I think our chances are about 50-50.
Are they? Yeah. Well, you'll have to send us some pictures of it so we can see it. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, God bless you. And again, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you all as well. Thank you for having me.
We're grateful to Ben for being with us this evening, and also for taking time out of not just his busy schedule as a worship leader, but also his busy schedule as a dad to two young children. As we close out this evening with Kelly playing the 7 hymns we have heard and learned about, I just want to say how much I have enjoyed spending these Sunday evenings with you, as we have learned more about Advent and how observing an intentional Advent brings us to a fuller experience of the coming of Christ. May you have a most blessed Christmas, receiving the gift of God's light come into the world, Jesus the Christ, Emmanuel, God with us. Amen. When you're ready.